Okay, so I sat down to film this whole video and finished it, put it on the little USB SD card adapter thing for my laptop, and then it was like something came up, and then I ended up deleting everything on the SD card, including all the photos I had on it. So I think that's the universe's way of saying, you need to try again, you need to do a better job, and the punishment for your slack job is I will delete all of your photos from the SD card. So here we go again. This is gonna be part 2 of just things I've observed, things I've learned about my personality over time. I really liked doing the first video. It was nice just to sit down and reflect on and talk about some of these things. And I think I said in that video that I tend to find the pressure of like the speaking into the camera aspect of it helps me flesh this stuff out for myself. And if anyone else is interested in that, that's great. But it's almost like I'm mainly like making this for myself because it's just what I'm enjoying making right now. But yeah, in no particular order, I'm going to get on to a bunch more things like that. Now, let's get into some things I've observed about my personality over time. So I wanted to start this off by talking about conscientiousness and a little bit about what it's like to be someone with low conscientiousness. I often find that this is something that's not very well articulated in the psychology community, and most of the information that I've been able to find about low conscientiousness is quite critical and tends to just bring up the negatives of it, but doesn't really do a very good job of looking into the perspectives or the frames or even the potential benefits of not having very high conscientiousness. And if you don't know what that is, conscientiousness is one of the 5 major measurable personality traits. What is it? You've got conscientiousness, openness to experience, neuroticism, agreeableness, and what's that 5th one? I always forget the 5th one. It's I forget the 5th one. It's just going to come into my head in a minute, but I forget what the 5th one is. Anyway, the conscientiousness domain is the domain that has to do with diligence, achievement, and sort of like applied effort. So getting things done. And, it also has to do with orderliness and industriousness. They're like subcompartments of conscientiousness. And it's really like, just to summarize it, I think, it's the sense of a conscientious person is going to use the information available to them and then chart out how they want to like navigate the course to get to a certain result. It's like they're achievement oriented, and they find a sense of purpose and achievement and self-value in getting things done and achieving them. And there's a lot of benefit to this. Obviously, we need this in the world, because if people weren't motivated to push themselves or humanity forward, and they didn't have that work ethic instilled in them, even oftentimes to sometimes an obsessive or restless level, things wouldn't move forward. So it is very important. Now, the benefits of that are often listed, but the negatives aren't so much. Like, for example, I know people personally who are measure very, very highly in conscientiousness when they take, for example, like an open psychometrics test, or they do the paid Big 5 test. One of my best friends is actually very conscientious, and there's so many amazing things about his personality in that way. But he himself will be the first one to tell you that the negative of that is the obsessiveness and the restlessness that can come with it until you feel like you've got the things done. And I do feel that people who are quite conscientious tend to derive their self-worth from the level of achievement that they have. Anyway, likening this to myself, because this is what this is about, it's all about me. I'm not very conscientious, right? I'm like 30th percentile on average if I take an open psychometrics test or the paid test. I've went over those results with my psychologist, and he seems to think they're quite accurate, like about 30th percentile. If you put me in a room with 100 people, I'm going to be less conscientious than 70 of them, right? That's what it means by 30th percentile. And let's talk a bit about this low conscientiousness. I think on the surface, it tends to look like something that's just like, okay, you're someone who's kind of lazy and not really motivated to achieve things, and you don't really set goals. But I think what doesn't get touched on a lot, and it's a bit frustrating that it doesn't, is there's sort of more to it than that. And the thing that doesn't often get touched on is, I think, conscientiousness is not just about if you set goals and achieve them, but it also has subtler domains regarding your perception and how you relate self to other. And what I mean by that is, someone who's quite conscientious, what I notice is that they tend to have this pattern of assuming a large amount of self-responsibility. And I don't just mean that in the colloquial way we would say self-responsibility, as in like, it's a good thing that he's a responsible guy, see? I don't know why I have to speak in this accent, but this guy's a responsible fella. He's got a good head on his shoulders, see? But, you know, I don't just mean it like that. Whatever that should mean. I mean it like, this is someone who tends to look at things in terms of how they can impact them. In other words, they are sort of like magnetically positive. They look at how something's going to work and how they fit in it and how they can then impose themselves on the situation oftentimes in order to get what they want out of it. Where someone who's not very conscientious, what I notice is self-responsibility is a vaguer and more fluid concept in that way. It doesn't just mean that we're lazy. It's more like we just don't look at things in a way of like, how do we impose ourselves on it? We're more passive and more perception oriented, really. We're more wired in our own awareness of the thing, and we're often quite subjective. It doesn't always have to be that case. Someone can still be extroverted and low conscientiousness. But I often notice, and especially with myself, and like I said, it is all about me, I'm not very objectively motivated by things. So I don't look at things in terms of like, how can I achieve this thing? And then even if I am thinking about something ahead or a goal or something I need to achieve, it doesn't really like, it's not an exciting prospect for me to achieve something. It doesn't really make me feel great, the idea of getting something done. And I don't have this like restless energy in me to achieve things. And to be honest, if I had my way, which I do, luckily, quite a bit of the time, I'll just kind of saunter through life. Like, my ideal day would not be like achieving all these things I need to do, but it would be kind of like letting life take me where it does. And so I don't have this sense of like putting myself at the forefront of things. I think in a way I'm a lot more fluid and kind of like feminine, not in a gender concept way, but more in a receptive to life kind of way. And I think that's what low conscientiousness can look like a lot of the time to people and doesn't get acknowledged, is that we don't actually have this way of looking at life where we're kind of very like free will oriented. It's almost like we tend to move more towards a kind of deterministic kind of life, where it's like the example I gave in my head before when I was thinking about this was I was picturing, like, for some reason, cowboys. And the cowboys I was picturing is there's like one cowboy who goes to a place where there's a horse, and then he buys a map, and then he talks to town folk, charts down where the nearest settlements are in a different town, and then figures out the best way to get there on the map, the most efficient way of getting there, and figures out the right amount of stuff that he needs for the journey, and then takes off on the journey. And gets there and then does not rest until he's, taken up residence in this new town, and then that's the purpose of his day and his life, and he will feel good for having achieved those things. It's quite dopaminergic in that sense. It's almost like it's about desiring the thing and getting it done. It's not impulsive dopaminergic. It's more strategic. It's like, how am I going to get those things done over time? Or if you take the low conscientiousness cowboy, me, what's probably gonna happen is I'm gonna like walk into the village, and then I'll be like, oh, cool, horses. I could go for some horse riding. I'm quite high in openness as well. So I'll get on the horse, go on a bit of a journey, and that would be interesting. And like listening to some music. Apparently this cowboy has access to digital music, so the time frame's a bit mixed up. But And then, I'd find like the cowboy would find a map on the floor and pick it up and be like, oh, there's like all these settlements up ahead. Maybe I could go check one out. And they would actually enjoy the process of just going to find these different settlements and these different things. And then when they got there, they might talk to people in the town and, hang out and learn some things and reflect on stuff and like get a sense of the horse more and meet some people. And someone will eventually say, oh, there's some settlements over there. If you're interested in residency here, and then you might decide, oh, I kind of want to stay here. But you see, the reason I'm using this metaphor is to say that the former cowboy, the conscientiousness cowboy, there's this sense of like you go into the thing with a kind of an assumption of free will to impose yourself on the necessary things you need to get what you need. It's like, I take responsibility for this, that, and this part of the plan. That's why I think a lot of CEOs they measure very high in conscientiousness because they're very diligent, hardworking people, which is good in a lot of ways. But with the latter example, you've got someone who they kind of move through life and accept what life has to offer them. Now, obviously, there can be drawbacks. This is turning into a rant about conscientiousness. I was supposed to relate this to myself, but it's my channel to deal with it. But like with lower conscientiousness, I think life is something that is often seen to be more just like something to be beheld. And there are negatives of it because for me, for example, in my teens and some of my early 20s as well, I just sit around smoking pot and playing World of Warcraft and hanging out with my friends, and I wouldn't do anything else. And it never really even occurred to me that I had to. As crazy as that sounds, it just kind of seemed like, oh, I'll figure it out at the time. And that stopped working after a while. And, I did have to start taking more responsibility. And I did have a bloody rude awakening as I went into my 20s and more in that respect, and learned that, yes, I do have to start taking care of myself. And it's taken years to get to the point where I actually kind of take more of an enjoyment and a pride in that now. I like doing that. But it's still not something that I look at as like, that's going to make me happy. I think that's another thing that conscientious people tend to do, is their sense of worth and well-being and what will fulfill them in their mind is very tied up in these endeavors, where for me that looks at best it looks kind of confusing, and at worst it seems antithetical to itself, because it's like, how could you be satisfied because you're still kind of going to be the same even though you've achieved the thing? And I think it's this distinction that some people don't make between their objective circumstances and their subjective faculties. I don't think some people do that. They just they're just fused to some people. So they're like, if I have more money, I'd be happy, even though there's obvious evidence of lots of people who have more than enough money, more than enough fame, more than enough sex, more than enough whatever else, and they're still miserable, some of them even more miserable than when they had even set out to get those things, because now there's no plausible deniability regarding what makes them happy. So I think that does actually nudge some people towards a kind of nihilism, an existential crisis, because it's like, well, nothing the world told me to do has brought me any closer to fulfillment. So it almost makes fulfillment itself look like this elusive, smoky thing, right? Where, for me, for example, a lot of the things that I will put time and energy into, I'm going to save the last bit here because I want to make the next point about this kind of thing. But a lot of the things that I will put time and energy into, they are because they're like authentic processes that I want to engage in. But obviously, like I said, there can be negatives, because when you're not very conscientious, you don't tend to make plans and chart things out so much. And if you do, plans don't... Like, I have a bit of conscientiousness, so my plans can hold some traction. Like 30th percentile is not the worst. But if you're really low in conscientiousness, I've seen this in other people as well, it's like plans to them, like their mind doesn't actually do that. And we don't consider this. We just assume people need to have plans and goals, and that's a thing that anyone can do. But it's like, no, it's not actually. Some people don't think in that way. They don't contextualize life in the way of something to be achieved, and it's hard for, it's almost like abstract for them to do that, right? It's something they have to kind of like do with their mind that's not natural to it, because they're more naturally tuned into a being state, or just like a perceiving thing. They're not very keyed into doing in that respect. So anyway, obviously lots of positives in the respect of you tend to take in more information. I do feel that that's the case. And also I think I think people who are lower conscientiousness can turn in and find what's important to them at a being level more. I think this can be the case. It doesn't have to, but it is something I do see where I think with people who are conscientious, very high conscientious, they might spend a long time assuming that they need to get the thing in order to feel fulfillment. And 20 or 30 or 40 years can go by on this process. And before then, they've not even learned how to be in touch with themselves or to connect with people around them, because they've been so hell-bent on the endeavor. And that's obviously an extreme example, but I do think there are negatives of it as well. Obviously, pretty much all cultures are highly biased towards achievement and conscientiousness and industriousness. I will not begin ranting about this, because I did in the last video that got deleted, and maybe that's why it got deleted. I don't know. Yeah. Suffice to say that I do feel that there's an overemphasis that's often placed on achievement and doing, and very little emphasis that gets placed on being, or just your inherent value and your right to just exist and take in the nature of existence. This is not something that gets talked about very often, and I'm not trying to take it too far on that end of the spectrum and be like, oh, no one should have to do anything. It's like, no, to progress as a species, we do have to put effort into things. But also, if we don't recognize the beauty of life and the isness of life, and we don't connect to being, we don't connect to one another, then we lose the substance, right? It becomes all work and no play. And then this is probably something to get into another time, but anyway, relating this back to me, I tend to be more on that side of things. So that's that one, conscientiousness. I'm not very high conscientiousness. And I've noticed this over time. I've become more accepting of it as well, I feel, in myself, to be honest. This one is related to the prior one in the sense that I find that activities that require me to be more involved, like even for example something like a board game, like I've got a friend who always tries to get me to play Catan. For years he's been trying to get me to play Catan. He's like, I know you'll love it once you get into it. Or like the idea of like playing golf or something, or playing a sport, you know, like when I was younger my parents tried to get me into sports, and it's just like, it's hard to explain sometimes to people if they don't think like me. Like, I'm so aware of the finitude of my energy, and doing that thing is like lighting a fuse and then blowing on it. Like, it just burns me out, because it's not really enjoyable for me to engage myself proactively in things in that way. It's not that I can't do it. I will do it if I feel that it's of value to me and I need to, but it wouldn't, like the idea of playing a board game or golf for leisure, it's not leisurely to me. It's actually just like kind of frustrating. I think that I tend to want to, or be more okay with doing things that are more almost like, I don't want to say passive. I think they are active, but they're subjectively active. Like reading a book, or I practice Zen Buddhism, so practicing a koan in Zen, or watching a movie, a good film with someone, or listening to some music. It's like, or going into nature, going to a beautiful city, traveling. You are receiving the energy of life. So there is a kind of passivity in that, but it's not this kind of like dull, sort of languid passivity. It's more of an active receiving and being able to take in the light of life, of what's going on around you. I think that's a more refined kind of reception, rather than just like, you know, coming home and, you know, smoking a doob and watching The Simpsons or whatever. Not if that's your thing, that's fine, but you get what I mean. It's basically like, I think that anything that requires that activity in a way, that's why I say it's related to conscientiousness. I think it doesn't really compute in my mind, and it's often difficult to explain this to people, because they're not watching a 30-minute video on these things and me having like some unhinged rant about how it works. So I've often learned that people don't want to do that on off the cusp. So I tend to just be like, nah, I don't feel like it. But then after a while, if you don't feel like playing Catan 100 times, and the guy's your best friend, he's going to start asking questions. And then you kind of have to explain this. And I feel like he finally gets it now. But yeah, that's another thing. I think the benefits of this are that, well, the benefits are that I think I'm just more involved, like said, I really love taking in what I want to, and I think there's a lot of value that can come from that, in terms of understanding and depth particularly, and also just enjoyment. I honestly could not word to you the kinds of enjoyment that I can get in everyday life from just going into a city, for example, or getting into a good book, or connecting with someone on an intimate level. Like I honestly don't have words for it. I don't know how to articulate it. But suffice to say, I'm brimming and teeming with enjoyment from those things because I've learned that they work for me over time, and I have invested in them enough, and I accept that they're aspects of my life that I really love and that work for me. But on the negative side, I think I do sometimes just turn things down because they seem exhausting to me, or I'm not interested in them. And then I also think that I don't know how much time I want to go into a big rant about this if the camera time is going to run out. Every half an hour I have to switch the thing. I think, like, just a quick example of a negative here. I used to work at a organic Whole Foods grocer place, and the boss, this guy used to come in. He was a really highly strung, neurotic dude who constantly needed to be placated by the staff. So you'd go in and, like, even if you'd done everything you needed to do, it's like he needed to see you doing something or he would just freak out. And like, other staff told me this, like multiple staff had told me this. So like, if he was coming in at 12 o'clock, at 11:55, other staff would just start like taking apples and putting them in different places, or like take stuff off of a shelf and put it back on. Because it's like, he didn't actually really need to know what you were doing. He just needed to feel like you were doing something, because it's like, he was very neurotic and conscientious. So he was like, the business is... And if he saw you talking to someone or standing there, it's like he would like blow up inside. You could feel it was that kind of energy he had in the air. You could feel it. And I'm not saying he's wrong, by the way. I'm just, it's observation. And the thing that I used to get in trouble with, and eventually I did get fired from that job, is I'd figure out all the things I needed to do and I would complete them. And then outside of that, I just kind of would like be there and man the store, because that's what I was doing most of the time. I was just running up cash registers. I was doing this thing over here, I would do things as they needed to come up, but I wouldn't make myself a certain way to try to give off an effect to him. And I think that's a tendency of a bit like something a bit, it's not, the personality metric for it is not disagreeableness, although it seems disagreeable. It's not. It's actually politeness. So it's your ability to assimilate to institutions. That's the technical definition for politeness, if you like, I think, is a better way of saying it. I didn't necessarily assimilate to the pattern very quickly, because I thought to myself, if he has a problem with, I'll tell him, I'll show him what I've done, and then I'm just kind of here, like, like, why would I need to, like, placate him? I'd rather just talk to him about it if it came up. But what I didn't realize, what I was too dumb to realize, is that you couldn't talk to this guy. He would not hear you. He never heard a word anyone said. He was only doing his thing in his way, and he's the boss, and that's it. And if you don't toe the line there, you can't be a part of that crew. And it did actually get me fired. So again, like, I'm not saying there was probably wrongs and rights on both sides when you look at it from a bigger point of view. But the reality is it did get me in trouble. So things like that, I've had to learn over time that sometimes it's just not appropriate for me to not act in that situation, or not to make it look like I am. And it bloody annoys me a lot of the time, because this could be really entitled as well, and like, I don't want it to get taken the wrong way, but I just want to be authentic about it with you. A lot of the time it annoys me that the world, and I said I wouldn't do this, it annoys me a lot of the time that pretty much wherever you are in the world and whatever you're doing, it's like we only value like hard work and industriousness and getting things done. And it's like you're treated like almost like a second-class citizen if you don't really value those things a lot of the time. I've been pretty lucky with it because people perceive me to be disciplined because I actually like certain things in life that people associate with discipline, even though for me they're not disciplines because I enjoy them. Like working out a lot, like working hard on the things I care about, like building relationships. I like those things, so they're not discipline for me. But people see that as discipline, partially because of how saturated the self-help community is with those things, and partially just because they appear somewhat conscientious and active based on the merit of them being active things. But, you know, when I was younger, I did have that a lot. I used to get judged a lot. I used to be called lazy a lot of the time. And although it's true I am a little bit lazy, I definitely don't think I'm as lazy as some people put it. It's just I just didn't want to do those things. I didn't have any motivation for them. I was doing other stuff, you know, but it's hard to have that conversation because of the cultural biases. Like, for example, you might talk to someone and they're like, oh, well, what do you do? Oh, that doesn't sound like you're doing very hard work. And it's like, yeah, but have you ever read Kierkegaard? And the guy's like, what Kierkegaard? What? And you're like, have you ever read any philosophy in your life, any psychology in any history? Do you know anything about any of that stuff? And it's like, well, no, I'm too busy doing this thing. But that person will get credit because people understand hard work in that way, but they don't understand necessarily the value of refining your consciousness, developing your psyche, and learning to understand how things work more at a subjective level, because it's not as important to most people, apparently. I will stop my rant because I get heated and I get flustered and my face gets red. And I think it's already been half an hour on the camera, so I got to change the thing. But that is number 2. I tend to prefer more not passive, but subjectively active things rather than objectively active things. So that's number 2 there. Another one I thought I would add into this, and this is a fun one. This just for me, something I find very fun is I feel that as I've gotten older, I think one way of saying it would be to say inner child. That term, I don't know if it's the perfect way of putting what I'm trying to say, but you just try read between the lines with what I'm saying. There's an aspect of kind of enthusiasm or zest that I think I've always had, and I do think obviously it's active in children. It's kind of like the sense of wanting to engage with people and life as though it were a mystery that you get to explore. Because obviously when you're young, you don't have all these interpretations and obligations and things wired over everything that you're doing, and therefore narrowing and compressing your view of life. It's more free and open and it's more pure in a way, I suppose. And I think, like pretty much everyone else, I think when I was very young, I think that was a natural aspect of me. And then I think what happened for me in my like earlier years, going into like especially the age of like around puberty and early teens, I think that I learned to shut away a lot of emotion, and I think I did it to protect myself from the kind of situations that I was dealing with at home or whatever else at the time. And also just with other people. I had a lot of difficulty connecting with people when I was younger. And I think my way of handling it was becoming fairly reserved and also a bit caustic in a way. Like I would sort of, I wasn't like bar humbug or anything, but I think I would kind of shut away how I felt. And I think I would kind of retreat to more of a dry, analytical way of looking at things. And I think it was because I was scared of my feelings a lot of the time, frankly. I was scared because I've always felt things very intensely, and I felt like part of me learned how to keep that under wrap or under check because I think I needed to for my own safety a lot of the time, or at least that's how I felt. And I think I did that for a very long time. And then what started to happen is I really got into like pot and psychedelics and stuff, right? Long story short, when I was like in my going into my later teens. And I think on the one hand, that actually further compounded this repressive or suppressive process of like keeping emotions down, because I learned that if I felt bad, I could sort of like take something to make it go away, or I could at least divert it. But on the other hand, I think it had an opposite effect where I think those things actually did open me up to a lot of more experiences and did it indirectly allow me to look more at myself. I'm not advocating that at all, by the way. I'm just saying for me personally, that was something I was doing back then. And I do think those things, or maybe the people that I was associating with around those things, it did open me up a lot more. And I think that I started to naturally become more accepting of my feelings. But I do think it was a long time until I got to the point where it's like now, for example, I've been sober for over 2 years completely. I haven't had a drink in 2 years. I haven't, nothing. I've smoked cigarettes and I do drink coffee. I'm not smoking now, but I do drink coffee every day, like just to be completely 100 with you. But I think what started to happen over time is that there's not really anything I don't feel that I can run away from myself. And I think the difficult part of that is that when stuff hurts, I tend to really feel that pain. Like, it doesn't feel like there's anything I have to get away from it. Because even if I was to like binge eat or go on a shopping spree, it's like, it doesn't really, it's so obvious to me that doesn't do anything. So it actually just like makes it seem like I'm delaying it, and I don't feel like I can run away from myself. So when I'm really hurting, I tend to really feel that pain down to my core. And I'm realizing now that like this point's about the kind of the positive end of this, and I'm tying the negative into it. So whatever. It's my channel, again, deal with it. But the positive side of it is, I think that the joy and the elation that I experience in everyday life is, I don't think I realized how long I was holding that back. It brings something up when I'm saying it. It does. It's such a kind of a strong feeling. I don't think I realized that for a long time it felt like at some level it wasn't safe to be who I was or to enjoy things, because I don't think other people around me knew how to do that. But what's happened as I've got older, and I've done a lot of therapy, and I've cried a lot, and I've uprooted my life a bunch of times, and I've had a lot of different people in my life, and I've eaten a lot of ice cream and whatever. I've gotten to the point where I do actually feel that I can be all right with being happy when it's happening. And that has lent it a kind of like, I feel like I have more access to the playfulness in me, is why I said about the inner child at the beginning and this point. I feel like I have more access to just engaging with life more freely and not having to know what everything is or how everything's going to go. Like, I can just go out for a day and get on a train and see what happens. See if I meet some interesting people, or I might see a cafe that I like. And this is the openness aspect of my personality as well. But I'll just kind of saunter in, or like there might be someone I think's cute and I might just say hi to them, and then we might end up having a weekend together and make all these really cool memories. Or it might be a bookstore, and I might, like, sometimes something I've been doing recently is I go into like a secondhand bookstore and I'll just pick up some random book and see what it's like. And I never would have known that author, and I think that novelty and the being able to toy with life, if you can see what I'm saying with it, that has made things a lot more enjoyable. And I think that part of me has become more active and more of a guiding feature in how I make my decisions now. And I don't feel ashamed of it or guilty about it anymore. I don't feel like I have to hold back being all right. Or having fun with things. I think something I learned really early on was that it's like, it never felt like it was bloody like the time or the place in my house to really be having a good time. It always kind of felt inappropriate, I think, a lot of the time, because it wasn't appropriate based on the consensus gentium of the emotional milieu of the house was not particularly positive a lot of the time, or my peers around me even sometimes, So I think I've had to teach myself that that's okay. And I think the way that happens, or it has for me, if you haven't ever heard of IFS, like internal family systems, that's been really helpful for me, is just learning that it's okay to let different aspects of you come forth as they need to and work with them at the time. And the validation that you'll sometimes, for me, I'm talking about myself, I'm like saying like to myself, the validation that you're looking for a lot of the time is inherently baked into the process itself. You don't need it from some outside thing. you're allowed to be the way that you are, and there's a beauty in just being how you are, even though you're totally fucking imperfect a lot of the time. And I really do feel that in my gut at this point, you know, not as an abstract thing, but like as a day-to-day thing. And that's made my life a lot more enjoyable and freeing, and it's made my interactions with people more real, I think, a lot of the time. You know, because I don't mind if I fall, or I don't mind if I make a mistake as much, because I know that I'm there to catch myself. And I think that kind of safety that you build for yourself allows that sort of more playful, childlike aspect of you to flourish and to express itself more naturally in day-to-day life. So that's the last one. And that was a bit all over the place. I do think there's something good in what I'm saying, but I don't know if I'm like titling that part right. Yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, I think this has been going for like 40 something minutes, for like the longest video I've ever done on YouTube. But I'm just enjoying making these. Like, they're just nice to talk about this stuff, as I said before. And yeah, if you haven't already, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing it, commenting for the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. My email's down below. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I hope to see you in the inevitable third part that I will be doing to this. I'm probably going to do 3 or 4 of these, would be my guess. I don't know if I'm going to release them all. I think I'll at least release this one and probably the next one that I make. As I said, I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.